Well, I never thought I'd see the day that I wanted to make a Jayber build video on the channel, but Season 3 is going to make me do it. After countless times of Nexon trying to get Jayber to work, they've finally given him a bunch of meaningful buffs, making him pretty strong in certain pieces of content, and also making him a pretty solid choice for mobbing, or even bursting down that boss at the end of a mission. Don't believe me? Well, I wouldn't either, but here's him completing Purge 10 in under 3 minutes, and that's no simple feat for most Descendants. So in today's video we'll be breaking down my current mobbing build for Jayber, explaining the skill rotation, how it all comes together. We've got the modules, weaponry, Arche Tuning, trigger mods and components all to come. So as always, if that sounds good to you, then what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Now if you've never used Jayber before and unsure as to how his kit behaves, well, you could be forgiven, as I imagine 99% of this player base have yet to experience his actual playstyle. Now what makes him so unique is his first two skills deploy turrets, with his one being an offensive turret for damage, and his two being a support one for healing and also providing damage reduction. Now skill 3 typically swaps to a unique weapon, allowing you to deal skill power AoE damage, but also heal and extend your turret durations if they are hit. And then lastly, his skill 4 is our main damage payoff, to detonating our turrets to fire out explosives 3 times before they start to disappear. Now if the kit ended there though, Jayber would still be stuck in bottom tier hell, but fortunately both of his turrets come with an enhanced state, providing him with additional benefits, which we can trigger either manually through the use of his skill 3, or by detonating any number of turrets with his 4 to gain a buff called Overhaul, meaning that any turret that gets placed in the next 30 seconds will deploy in their enhanced state automatically. Now the offensive turret gains an effect for a large radius around the turret, causing 209.7% base skill power damage to any enemy that's within that circle every 0.3 seconds. Now this will last for around about 10 seconds before that circle dissipates, ready for it to be triggered manually once again, or for another skill 1 turret to be deployed. Now for the support turret though, instead we'll be granting an enemy taunt for 10 seconds, drawing all the attention towards it, and ideally bringing enemies closer to that offensive turret for that AoE damage. Jayber's passive means that we'll see a skill power and firearm attack increase of 20% when 2 or more turrets are active at the same time, making all of our damage over time or explosion do even more damage, so ideally we'd like to see as many turrets down at a time as possible and reap that extra skill power boost. And that's Jayber in a nutshell. So how are we going to turn all of these turrets into a solid DPS mobbing character? Well, the best use case is to abuse his enhanced offensive turret, acting as a makeshift toxic puddle, along with spamming our skill 4 for the increased burst DPS that we need to be able to take down most of those stubborn elites or even those end of level bosses. We want to focus on cooldown, damage and general quality of life stats to keep Jayber upright, while we also let his turrets go to town. So let's kick it off with the cooldown aspects, with both Nimble Fingers and MP Conversion being our go-tos here, before we move into that damage category, giving us a solid 62.1% cooldown right out the gate. Now for our damage side of things, we'll be maxing out our damage multipliers as well as our skill power buckets to really dish out that damage. So multipliers will be grabbing Focus on Dimension and Dimension Amplification, giving us both higher multipliers for our damage over time to benefit from, but also a little more when it comes to the cooldown side of things, helping us with that turret spam. Now for our skill power, we'd grab the perfect combo of power increase and non-attribute amplification, giving us the best base damage without hurting our cooldowns, but also nudging us a tiny bit more with spear and shield, helping our base skill power bucket just that little bit more. Now our last 3 mods are going to be designed for our quality of life, with expansion being used to boost the damaging radius of the enhanced turret, making mobbing much easier. Increased HP will be here to help with our turrets as well as our own stats to stay upright, especially with our component set of choice lacking a little bit in that base HP stat department. And then lastly we'll be helping our MP bar, going for a selective recovery MP, making all of our blue ball collections in missions almost reset our MP bar for empty. Now I can already hear the comments asking why that mod instead of MP Collector, but inside of my testing, when it came to Axion especially, MP Collector was wildly inconsistent, regardless of the amount of enemy kills that we've got going on, especially in the missions that have like 200 to 300 enemies that you have to mob at the same time. So I did swap to Selective Recovery, and I found it much more easier and much more consistent to keep myself topped up throughout a mission. Now one mod swap that I would suggest for you to use if you're capable of managing the cooldown buff is going to be Multi-Talented in place of Spear and Shield. Now this does give you a consistent offensive turret spam, but as the skill itself is going to be Dimension, allowing you to be able to spam turrets easier but also get uses from his skill 4 for even more burst damage. Now both versions are great and do have their uses, but if you want to avoid the micromanagement of your setup and keep on top of your buff durations, then Spear and Shield is going to be the way, but if you want the true version of Jayber and want to go for pure maximum damage, then Multi-Talented is going to be your best slot in here. Lastly, let's talk about red mods for Jayber, because 2 of his pool have been recently disabled due to how his turrets can now be deployed, making them pretty much irrelevant. That just leaves us with only 2 of us to be able to mess about with. Now the one of choice that we will be using here is going to be turret engineering, allowing us to still buff our turrets up with one single cast, but the main reason is because his default skill 3 will swap to that of a unique weapon, and that cancels your buffs from any stat stick that you did have in your hands, seeing as we have a great option for us to hold at all times, which is going to be buffing and snapshotting our turrets. That is going to be boosting our skill power. We don't want to be swapping away from this, so that's going to be changing our skill 3 to an activate. It's just going to be better quality of life for us, and then also give us the option to still boost our turrets without the downside should we actually need it. Now for our trigger mod of choice, we'll be wanting to rock power beyond. Now while technically it will be giving us a flat skill power increase, which is already fantastic, it also pairs really nice with our offensive turret, as it can now apply tow to enemies, which is going to be bringing them into the radius of the damaging circle, and it does make that mobbing much easier. Moving swiftly to the reactor side of things, Jayber really gets the most out of his mobbing DPS from his turret and not from his skill 4, meaning that it makes the most sense for us to rock the materialized phase reactor, boosting our skill power into our turret zones. Now for the mountings, we will want to rock a hand cannon, as our best in slot stat stick will be boosting our skill power as we place more turrets down, which is going to be meaning more DPS for us overall. And then lastly, for our substats, the best I've found is a roll into cooldown and non-attribute, but if you do prefer to run the multi-talented mod in place of that spear and shield, then swapping to a non-attribute and dimension roll ratio will actually offer you a little bit more DPS. For the component side of things, with Jayber being a non-attribute descendant and one that will be looking to spam his skills often, we'll actually want to rock a 4-piece into mages, granting us a huge increase to our non-attribute skill power. Now with the 2-piece skill power and the 4-piece non-attribute skill power, we'll be massively increasing our power buckets, making the enhanced turrets hit so hard and making mobbing an absolute breeze. Now as our turrets will also snapshot when they're placed, we can keep the power there if we choose to extend our turret durations through the use of our skill 3. Now as for the rolls, the default of HP and MP rolls on each piece is pretty great for us, giving us the MP sustain that we need to keep going with little downtime. And then as for the cores, we'll once again be rolling with the default of HP and defense for general use, but the electric resistance that you can see on mine has just pretty much kind of carried over from the hangar farming, and I have been kind of going back and forth and using the exact same set on a few other descendants, so that's the reason for that. As for our weaponry, while you can make a case for shooting alongside your turrets or even using Kingsguard Lance to place more turrets down at the same time and cover more ground, the best stat stick in the game for him to hold is going to be Peacemaker, providing more skill power boost as you place those turrets down, which is perfect for the snapshots when placed, but also building up that burst fire mode of Peacemaker, ideal for shredding through resistances with focus rounds or bursting down a boss. Now as for the builds, there isn't much in here that's really needed, but this is what I'm currently rocking. I am going for Defense Master, which will help boost our survivability and then passing that onto the turrets, but really you can rock whatever you want in here as long as we don't have any mods that are going to be boosting us from a stat stick perspective. Cores-wise is a different case though, as with Peacemaker we can go for a 3 yellow core setup, providing space for a 2 sprint speed core and 1 grapple charge time core setup, which is going to be ideal for keeping Jayber mobile and for speedy turret placement and farming. Substat wise, as we won't be shooting the gun that often, these don't matter too much, but if you are after what I've gone for, then a firearm attack, crit rate and crit damage roll would be best, and then ideally the fire attack that you can see on mine is going to be swapped with a weak point damage, as that is going to be your best in slot for damage overall. Now for our Arche Tuning, Jayber is a non-crit based descendant, allowing us to save some points from running crit and allowing us to go for a full skill power build. Heading to the right and grabbing skill cost nodes, skill power nodes, and then up to the top for cooldown, and also into the mutant cell is going to be the best course of action. Now while I did mess about initially with defense neutralization for the mutant cell here, hoping that the debuff would kind of trigger other modules for killing with debuffs, that didn't seem to work in my testing, so instead we'll actually be grabbing non-attribute cohesion and then further boosting up our skill power buckets. And then just to finish off the build, let's talk about our Inversion Reinforcement. With us being a skill power build, there tends to be less nodes for us to kind of grab, but we can still grab some nice boosts from our Season 3 reinforcement. First off, we'll be grabbing Arche's Circulation Tactic, granting us times where we can hit that cooldown cap, which is going to be ideal for even more turret spam. Now of course, if you're already running multi-talented as we've mentioned before in this guide, then this won't be needed, so you can always be swapped to a focus boost instead for less skill cost as you mob. Secondly, we'll be running a focus rounds mod, with any being good for us to run, just feel free to match that to the enemy weakness or to the element that you wish to rock on the Peacemaker. And then lastly, we'll be rounding this off with selective neurostimulation, helping to keep us topped up with MP, or even at times that we struggle to find a blue ball to grab. And with all that out of the way, that wraps it up for my go-to mobbing build for Jayber, finally getting some love and attention he's been after for over a year. Now, while I don't think this makes him top tier, I do think this brings him back into the pack, and he is a more reliable mobbing pick to grab than people give him credit. Either way, I'm happy to see him be playable and holding his own in the harder content that we have right now, so it's time that you got him leveled up and then fully built out. And so this is the section I want to hear from you. What are your current thoughts on Jayber? Do you think that the buff patch was enough? And then lastly, what are your current thoughts on Season 3 so far? Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video. As I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on the next video.